Namaskara. I myself, Dr. Manorama BN, Principal and Editor of Noopura Bhramari Institution, welcoming you to Shodha Sarani, an art research series. This series is dedicated to all kinds of performing arts, including allied art forms. After the successful production of Shravana Sarani, an expert lecture series in auditory form held in 2020, we Noopura Bhramari, the reputed Institute of Karnataka for Qualitative Research and Writing, have now come up with another series, Shodha Sarani, an art research series. Our aim is to encourage, promote qualitative research and help in the upcoming studies by establishing the productive research to the art fraternity. This week, episode number 9 in Shodha Sarani, bringing the presentation on study of pattern of dancing sculptures in Eastern India with special reference to Odisha by Bangalore-based research scholar, organizer Shalini Vittal. We have come across dance history of Gupta period, which is of northern India. We have seen dance history of west coast of India. Now we are focusing on dance and components of eastern coast of India. By this kind of wide survey, we can understand how our culture has given wide scope to art forms. Though some of the sculptural study has been taken place in Odisha region, this study focus on the wide range of MARGA and DESI. Only snippets of study has been brought in this presentation. The wide angle will be placed in upcoming research writings. We Noopura Bhramari feel very happy to produce in our Shodha Sarani. Let's welcome Srimati Shalini Vittal to this art research series. Over to you, Shalini.
Namaste. I'm Shalini Vittal. Today, the topic of Shodha Sarani for me, I have taken as study of pattern of dancing sculptures in Eastern India with special reference to Odisha. Firstly, I would like to thank Noopura Bhramari for this wonderful opportunity. And today being Ganesha Festival, I'm really honored to present this paper with the blessings of Lord Ganesha. Coming back to the topic, yes, Eastern India. Eastern India of the present day, it includes the states of Bihar, Jharkhand, Odisha, West Bengal, and also Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Odisha in ancient times, it originally included Odra, Utkala, Kalinga, and Kosala. The modern term Odisha, it's derived from Odra, which is a small part of present Odisha. During the early medieval period, the country Kalinga extended to Odia-speaking tracts of Bengal, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Andhra Pradesh. Odisha plays a vital role in cultural fusion between North and South and in the maritime trade and colonization of Southeast Asia. The objectives of the present study is to study the history of Odisha, to understand the contributions of the major dynasties that ruled Odisha, to understand the sculptural pattern in the temples of Odisha. The methodology includes understanding the history of Odisha, the rule of different major dynasties, their contributions, study of the sculptural patterns of the temples of Odisha by way of field survey, taking photographs, observations, analysis of the sculptural patterns of the MARGA tradition, analysis of the sculptural patterns of the DESI tradition, and conclusion. The history of Odisha, it's based on various available sources. For example, the epics Mahabharata, the Ramayana. Epics Mahabharata is the earliest reference to Kalinga and Odra. Ramayana refers to Kalinga Nagara situated to the west of river Gomati and refers to the Gandhamardana and Utkala, associating it with Mekhala. Puranas like Vayu Purana, Matsya Purana, Bhagavata, Harivamsha Purana, and Vishnu Purana, etc., throw light on Kalinga and Utkala and legendary kings. The Jaina literature, it contains descriptions of Kalinga and Utkala. In ancient times, the people of Odisha were largely the followers of Jainism and Buddhism. So the Jaina and Buddhist literature narrates about the people of ancient Odisha and its culture. The Arthashastra of Kautilya, composed in 4th century BC, is a standard treatise on polity and statecraft, which influenced the political organizations of Kalinga. Among other such works mentioned may be made of the legal texts like the Smritis of Manu, Narada, Brihaspati, Katyayana, Yajnavalkya, and Kamandaka, which have molded the political systems of Odisha. The Brihat Samhita of Varahamihra, Ashtadhyayi of Panini, and Kamasutra of Vatsyayana also throw welcome light on the socio-religious and economic conditions of ancient Odisha. The Hathi Gumfa inscriptions. This inscription deals about the life and activities of King Kharavela from his boyhood to his 13th renal year. The line 16th of the Hathi Gumfa inscription reveals that dance, music, and concert were popular in Kalinga. In line 5th of Hathi Gumfa inscription, that he organized performances of dance, song, drama, concert, and acrobatics, and instituted various samajas and ceremonies. For dance, as you see in the presentation, the photograph, there is a rectangular shaped dais. This is the Prekshagriha or the playhouse or the Rangapitha, which is necessary for the artist and the audience, or a Rangamandala for the spectators. The depiction of well-developed Prekshagriha or the auditorium in sculpture indicating the progress of Gandharva art in Kalinga. In the next photograph, we can see that in the spacious and oblong auditorium are seen the king Kharavela and the two queens seated in front row and the courtiers and dignitaries standing in the rear row, all enjoying the performance. Bharata's Natyashastra, which dates back to about 2nd century BC, in between 2nd century BC and 2nd century AD, it can be assumed that the above sculptures in Udaygiri and Khandagiri caves depict the presence of Natya form as said by Bharata in his Natyashastra. It also says that the King Kharavela, he organized dance and musical performances with grace and grandeur and laid emphasis on noble virtues of the musical arts in the Pendal. The Hathi Gumfa inscription claims that Kharavela, a Jaina king, stands as the earliest known king to be proficient in Gandharva Veda and having deep love for musical tradition in dance, song, drama, and instrumental music. This is corroborated by sculptures in the caves of Udaygiri and Khandagiri, as we have seen. Next, role of women. We have the history of Odisha. History of Odisha after this Kharavela period, we have Gupta period, and then after that we have, before Gupta period, we have a dark age, which has been which we have not been able to get the information. So again, the next period from which we get the information starts from the Guptas, and that is from the 4th century. And the next comes the Matharas, which is the 5th century. In between, we have the other 3 dynasties, which are of minor importance. So we are not dealing much with that. And after the Matharas, we have the Shailodbhavas, who belong to the 6th and 7th century. Then the Somavamshi dynasty, that is between 7th and 11th century. Then the Gangas, 11th to 13th century. During these period, the role of women had very respectable status, especially during the Somavamshi dynasty or the Somavamshi society. Some of these Somavamshi queens, they performed important works like the construction of temples. The queen Kulavati Devi, the mother of Udyodhikesri, constructed the Brahmeshwara temple at Bhubaneswar. The Devadasi practice and prostitution were prevalent during this period. The last Somavamshi king, Karnadeva, married a dancing girl named Karpurashri, who was born of a Mahari or Devadasi. The royal ladies had access to education and specialized forms of art like music and dance. Chandrika Devi, the daughter of Ananga Bhimadeva III, was accomplished in music and dance. She built the temple of Anantavasudeva. Shivarani, a lady of the Ganga lineage also, she was called as Kaliyuga Saraswati. So from all these we can see the role of women, what all the respectable status that they have enjoyed. All these can be seen. Starting with the Shailodbhavas, Shaila Udbhava. Shailodbhavas, it's originated from the rock. Shaila is a rock and Udbhava is the origin. So Shailodbhava is origin of rock, and this is the time where we get the temple construction, the details. So these Shailodbhavas, they were the devotees of Shiva and they also worshipped sun. They respected the Shakta tradition. During the Shailodbhava dynasty, they were major contributors of temple construction, especially the Lakshmaneshwara temple, Bharateshwara temple and Shatrughneshwara temple, all these three in the same premises, and Parashurameshwara temple, which was constructed during the 17th century. When we have a look at the Lakshmaneshwara, Bharateshwara and Shatrughneshwara temple, we can see that these temples, it marked the early phase of temple architecture in Odisha. And the Shailodbhavas, they had actually raised their head in the coastal region of Odisha. They extended from Mahanadi in the north to Mahendragiri in the south. The Shailodbhavas had a significant role in the history and culture of Odisha in the 7th century. And it was the rulers of this dynasty who built these temples. So when we see the first picture, we can see the concept of Nataraja here in the sculpture. One hand is on the thigh. The other hand is holding a Akshamala, two hands holding the snake, one hand holding Trishula. The remaining 3 or the 5 hands, they have got mutilated. One leg is in Agratala Pada and the other is in Trishrapada. The head is deflected towards the left in Nata and the Kati is in Udvahita. The next sculptural panel, we can see the dancers and the musicians performing in front of the king. This is the king, and here we can see some dancers performing. With the beginning of the 7th century, the history of Odisha, it becomes a very clear to greater extent because of the fact that during this century, the Shailodbhavas established a strong kingdom in part of the South Odisha, described as Kongoda, and their territorial dimensions also extended to the northern part of Odisha. They also contributed towards the construction of Parashurameshwara temple, and they respected, yes, the Shakta tradition, and they have sculpted the Shakta deities also on the walls of the temple. So the Parashurameshwara temple, we can see this one panel here where this whole thing is contributing towards the MARGA tradition and this is contributing towards the DESI tradition. Both the traditions are seen in these sculptures. So, from the history of 7th century AD in Odisha, it appears that Odisha became the battleground of 3 great contemporary powers. The Shailodbhavas, they recognized Shashanka of Gauda as their overlord, but after Shashanka's death, they became independent. but they were also supplanted by the Somavamshi kings, which comprised the modern districts of Ganja and Deri. This royal dynasty became extinct. Some discoveries also shows that the Bhaumakaras or the Somavamshis succeeded the former in establishing supremacy in Orissa. They became the contemporaries for some time, and in Utkala and Kosala, this Utkala and Kosala that comprised the modern Sonepur Sambhalpur tract in the upper Mahanadi Valley. The chronology of both the dynasties were interlinked with each other. As a matter of fact, the Orissan history of about 370 years covered by the rule of these two dynasties gave Orissa geographical unity and a homogeneous culture and a common language. Coming to the Somavamshi dynasty, this dynasty ruled between 8th to 12th century. During this rule, they constructed the Vittal temple, Shishireshwara temple, Mukteshwara temple, Kedaragauri temple, Rajarani temple, and Lingaraja temple. This Vaitala temple, this is dedicated to, Vaitala temple is dedicated to goddess Chamunda, accompanied by other Matrikas along with Ganesha, Veerabhadra and Bhaivas. The exterior of the temple is carved with the figures of Ardhanarishwara, Parvati, Mahishamardhani, Lakulisha tradition, Harihara, Surya, Nataraja and Nayikas, etc. Lakulisha means Laguda or Lakuta plus Isha. Laguda is the staff, or the Lakuta means the mace. The Isha, it means the Lord. So, meaning the Lord with a staff or a mace or club or stick. This was he was a prominent Shaivite revivalist, reformist and preceptor of the doctrine of Pashupatas, one of the oldest sects of Shaivism. According to some scholars, Lakulisha is the founder of the Pashupata sect, while another section argues that the Pashupata doctrine was already in existence before Lakulisha, and it was only its first formal preceptor. Shishireshwara, situated in the same compound of the Vaital temple, this is dedicated to Shiva. The exterior of the temple has images of Ganesha, Kartikeya, Mahishamardhani, and the figures of Nataraja, of course. Shiva in different forms like Ajayikapada, Ardhanarishwara, Hara, Parvati, Lakulisha, and some narrative scenes. The sculpture that you are seeing here on the window is denoting the concept of Ardhanarishwara. There's one more on the concept of Nataraja. The middle picture is obvious with two ladies standing and holding a musical instrument in their hands. This is the evidence of DESI with musical props. The third picture on the same slide, it has Salabhanjika, who is deeply involved in her thoughts. Next again, we have the Salabhanjika. The first picture to the left is Salabhanjika. The middle one is very much similar to the Mukra Mugde that we have of DVG's Antapura Gita. And of course, the sculptural patterns are a little different from that of South India. And the third picture that we are seeing to the right is again the Salabhanjika. There are many smaller panels consisting of minute sculptures. The present sculpture that you are seeing on the window, this corresponds to the Urudvrutachari of Natyashastra. Next, in the red picture that we are seeing, there are many of different Salabhanjikas. Again, the middle picture shows a Salabhanjika in a different sthanaka. Again, we have one more sculptures very similar to the Mukura Mugdhe. We have also a lady playing the flute, if you can see on the left side of the first picture, and a lady wearing an ankle on her leg. She's taking the hold of a small boy who's standing beside her. And the third picture is an indication of presence of erotic couples and Mithuna Shilpas also. There are a lot of Mithuna Shilpas in all these temples. The next one, the Salabhanjika, we can see in the swastika position. And the middle one depicts a lady in Samasthana with Udvahita Kati. And the third picture, we can see a row of sculptures which includes Mithuna Shilpas. Coming over to the next, Ganga dynasty. Ganga dynasty, they ruled from 12th to 13th century. During their rule, they have contributed towards the construction of Sukasari temple, Jagannatha temple, and Konark temple as the main temples. These are some of the sculptures from the contribution of Ganga dynasty. The lady with different sthanakas we can see. One is in Samasthana, one is in Gatagata Sthana. Gatagata is the sthanaka indicated in Sangita Ratnakara, wherein she's ready to move, but she's not moved. She's not stepped front. The left sculpture, the lady, we can identify this with Sangita Ratnakara's text as Parshvagata Sthanaka. Sthanaka. So the next one, here we have many other sthanakas. Coming back to this lady is actually, she's feeding an insect with her left hand, and the right hand is holding a prop, but the legs are seen to be in movement, and sthanaka can be identified as Parshvagata Sthana. The lady's right, in the next, the middle picture, the lady's right hand is placed on the right thigh, left hand is holding something, but the legs seem to be in a sthanaka again, which is Samasthanaka. In the third picture, the left hand is placed on the thigh, the right hand is holding something, and her bhava seems to be naturally smiling. The left leg is placed on the support at the back, which can be identified, as I told you, is Gatagata from Sangita Ratnakara. These are again some of the sculptures wherein we can see a lot of musical props like drums, cymbals, etc. This sculpture is indicating the presence of the Samasthana, these two also. And it is Desi Samapada. There is also Shaiva Sthanaka, and this is very similar to the pattern of Alidha that is said in Natyashastra. And this is the Nandyavarta, and this is Suchipada. In between, we can see in these smaller sculptures, we can see them in the Upavishta Sthanaka with Lalita Valita. They do this thing. Yeah, Lalita Valita Vrittahasta. Coming to the middle sculpture, we can see again the Lalita Valita and Vrittahasta. And here we can see this is the Vishamasuchi. This is Nandyavarta. These two are swastikas. Again, here we can see Pashni Pashvagata, means the heels, it comes like this. The One is here and the other is on the at the front, and it is turned. It is turned towards the side. So this is Pashni Pashvagata, and again we can see there are two ladies here with kolata scene that we can see, and we can also see the musical instruments like drum, as I already told you. The next picture, we can see the Desi Samapada in this. We can see the Pashni Pashvagata here again. Here, the distance between two legs is a little more than the previous here. So this can be Chaturashra. And again, here there is one Samapada. This is one Shaiva. These two are in Shaiva. And here is one is in Swastika and the other is in Sama. Here there is one Karana, which we can easily identify this as Kunchita Karana. Yeah. And here also we can see Swastika, Sama, and these two in Shaiva. Pashni Pashvagata. There is one Suchi Pada here. And this is, as I told you, Chaturashra. This Chaturashra Sthanaka, this is this is used in the present day Odissi dance, as we see. Here, I would like to make a mention here. This is the Prishchika Karana, which is represented beautifully in this. Here again, there is one Shaiva Sthanaka. This is Shaiva. This is Nandyavarta. And Eka Janunata. And this is one very similar to the Aludha pattern. The next picture, we have the Desi Samapada. Desi Samapada is this. Pashni Pashvagata, Shaiva, Nandyavarta. This is Pashni Pashvagata. This is Swastika. This is Nandyavarta. This is also Nandyavarta. This is the Suchipada. This is also again Nandyavarta. And we can see the ladies here. One lady is with the drum, and the other one is with the is very similar to the flute, holding this instrument. And here we have two smaller panels, this one and this one, wherein this is the starting of the Chakramandala Karana. You keep the foot to your side and take a round with the body bending towards the back. And this is the starting of that Karana, called as Chakramandala Karana. And here to the next picture, we see the Desi Samapada. And there is a lady who is playing the flute. This lady is playing the flute. And her Sthanaka is in the Motitha Sthanaka. Motitha Sthanaka again reference has been taken from Sangita Ratnakara. And there is one Swastika, and this is Sama. This is the Sama. So the role of Somavamshis and Gangas, as we see, they have made a major contribution. Especially the role of Somavamshis, their main achievements are still the marvelous temples at Bhuvaneshwar, like Raja Rani, Brahmeshwara, Lingaraja. They are the masterpieces of religious architecture of the world. During the late 11th and early 12th century, the Somavamshis were threatened by the powerful dynasties of Gangas of Kalinga and Palas of Bengal. It was Anantavarma Chodaganga of the Ganga dynasty who became the most powerful ruler. He conquered the central Orissa and ruled for more than 300 years. Ganga rulers patronized the worship of other deities like Shiva, Parvati, and Sun God. They seem to have attempted a harmony between Shaivism and Vaishnavism. The transformation of Shiva of the Lingaraja temple into the conjoined deity Harihara, the construction of Vishnu temple of Anantavasudeva by Ganga princess named Chandrika Devi in the midst of the Shiva temples indicate the synthesis of Harihara cult. The Ganga rulers, as we have seen, they were great patrons of music and dance. The Natamantapas, or the dancing halls of the temples, were the places where the Devadasis were performing dances to the tune of compositions. The temple of Jagannath at Puri and Sun temple of Konark have Natamantapas. The king Anangabhima III of Ganga dynasty added Natamantapa to the temple of Lingaraja. The Ganga kings employed damsels in the temples for singing and dancing. Tradition states that Padmavati, the wife of poet Jayadeva, was a Devadasi dedicated to Lord Jagannatha. She used to dance to the songs composed by her husband. The Ganga temple, particularly the Natamantapas, are full of singing and dancing girls with musical instruments found in the panels. The observations are like this. The contribution of the dynasties towards building the temple and the sculptures that we have seen, right from it starts early from 1st century BC till almost 13th century AD, though there is a period of dark age in the history of Odisha. Though there were a lot of minor dynasties, it was contribution of the dynasties like Shailodhava, Somavamshi and Gangas who are commendable. The Somavamshis left their legacy in the field of art and architecture. The Odisha temple architecture began during the Shailodhava period, reached the peak towards the close of the Somavamshi period. The 4 magnificent temples built by the Somavamshis include Lingaraja, Brahmeshwara, Mukteshwara and Rajarani, which are the masterpieces and the finest specimens of sculpture. The presence of MARGA tradition right from Udaygiri and Kandagiri caves, 1st century BC, it can be seen up to say around not exactly 13th century but a little lesser than that. It can be understood that the Desi tradition became prominent by the 13th century, though Desi tradition coexisted along with the MARGA tradition right from the 7th, 8th century as we have seen in the sculptures. But yeah, it always coexisted with the MARGA, but it started becoming more prominent only after 12th century, especially in Odisha. Also, it has been possible to understand the fading away of MARGA tradition and the prevalence of the Desi tradition. So, it has been possible to understand the sculptural patterns of both MARGA and Desi types. Analysis of sculptural pattern of MARGA. We can see that the presence of MARGA tradition, as we saw right from in the Udaygiri and Kandagiri case from 1st century BC up to 13th century. Also, it's been possible to understand the fading away of the MARGA and prevalence of Desi. The concept of Nataraja as different forms of Shiva is quite interesting. The Nataraja concept, we can see the different forms of Shiva as Ardhanarishwara, Bhairava, Ajayekapada, Lakulisha, and there are so many other forms of Shiva like Uma Maheshwara, even Harihara concept. All these have been really interesting. Dola Hasta and Rechakas, they were predominantly used in the Marga technique, which we can see in the sculptures of Salabhanjikas. Bhava is predominantly seen in almost all the sculptures, especially the Marga tradition of sculptures. But we can also notice that the both Marga and Desi styles can be seen intermingled. Generally, there's no distinct difference between Marga and Desi as we can identify. Most of the sculptures are Salabhanjikas in different positions. The Salabhanjikas are seen holding veena, flute, etc. Some of them are engrossed themselves in the swastika sthanas. Bhava is predominantly seen in all of them. A lady talking to a parrot, lady riding a horse, lady leaning on the wall, etc. can be seen. Even the miniature sculptures seen on the outside walls of the temple depict few charis like Urudvrita mentioned in Natyashastra. The Salabhanjikas in different bhavas, and we can also see the dancing couples Surya worship, lady playing the flute, lady warrior, the Matrika sculptures, and even the Naga Kannikis. In the Desi pattern, we can see that the Desi tradition became prominent by the 13th century. But again, as I told you, it has always existed with the Marga, but it started becoming more prominent only after 12th century, especially in Odisha. Also, the presence of angular knees, as we saw in the previous sculptures, like that of Mandala and Trashapada, and one in Trashra, one in Parshva, or any of those combinations. This is a highlight of the Desi tradition. The 13th century sculptures clearly indicate the usage of musical instruments predominantly, which is a unique characteristic of Desi tradition. Majority of the sthanakas are quite repetitive in the sculptures. Samapada sthanaka is predominantly seen in sculptures with a slight difference in the usage of kati or the base movement. Here I have not shown many of the sculptures because the sculptural pattern, as we see, there are a lot of sculptures. So due to lack of time, I'm restricting myself to a very few sculptures. Next to the Samapada Sthanaka, the most commonly found Desi Sthanakas are Shaiva Sthanaka, Vaishnava Sthanaka, Vardhamana, Nandyavarta, Chaturashra, Pashni Pashvagata, Motita, Vishmasuchi, Swastika, Ekapada, Gatagata, Pashni Viddha, Ekapashvagata, Brahmasthanaka, Vinivartita. All these sthanakas have been identified because of Sangita Ratnakara, where we can see the authorship of Sangita Ratnakara in the same as almost 12th century as a text. So we can easily correlate these sthanakas with the text. The variations in feet also, there are a lot of Kunchitapada, Anchita, Suchi, Udghatita, Agratala, Akshipta, Swastikapada, and there are many varieties like Samaswastika, Kunchita Swastika, etc. The feet are seen performing all that Kuttana, Nikutta, Mettu. All these are predominantly seen. Some of the feet variations are already mentioned in Bharata's Natyashastra, and they can be adapted as charis also. For example, Kunchitapada can be adapted as Mattalli chari of Natyashastra. The usage of stringed instruments or the Tatavadya is found to be really less in the 13th century sculptures. There are more of Ghana, Sushira and Avanadha instruments, which indicate the presence of predominant nritta or the rhythm. Lots of musical instruments like mridanga, trumpet, cymbals, damaru, they are highlighted, indicating of holding props during dance instead of nrittahastas. Both Marga and Desi styles can be seen intermingled. Generally, no distinct difference between Marga and Desi is identified. The sthanakas can also be identified as both Marga and Desi. Some sthanakas like Avidha, Alidha, Pratyalida can be related to the Marga. However, the Desi Shaiva sthanaka, it becomes the starting of Avidha because it starts from this. Similarly, many of the sthanakas are either the starting or the ending of chari. Importance of katti in the form of tribhangi is predominantly seen in majority of the sculptures. Also, the chauki or the chaturashra sthanaka is predominantly seen, and it's to be noted that the same sthanaka is used in the present-day Odissi dance. Predominantly, nritta can be seen with very less bhava in the later sculptures. Abhinaya is found to be very less, which indicates the presence of more and more of rhythmic dances in vogue during those times. The dances depicted in the later sculptures, especially the 12th, 13th century sculptures, can probably be identified as Rasa or the Ullasa dance, which is mentioned in the text Abhinaya Chandrika, which is again a unique dance text exclusive to the present Odissi dance. Coming to the conclusion, we can see that the life in Orissa has always been dominated by the cult of Purushottama or the Jagannatha. It appears that up to 10th century AD, Vishnuism existed in parts of the present Orissa and had occupied subordinate position due to lack of patronage by the royal people. But the construction of the temple by Ananthavarman Chodaganga Deva, a strong follower of Vishnuism, marked a firm change in the religious history of Orissa. The Jagannatha cult is a combination of many religious cults like Brahmanism, Buddhism, Shaivism, Shaktism, Tantricism, and Vaishnavism. The prevalent religious trends in Odisha assimilated in the cult of God Jagannatha in due course of time. Even in the present day, Jagannatha or the Lord of the Universe is honored and worshipped by the followers of different religious sects in India. Orissa, politically and culturally, which was started by their predecessors, the Somavamshis, who united the four separate regions then known as Kosala, Utkala, Kalinga, and Kongoda. The next Hindu kings in Orissa were the Suryavamshis. Orissa was ruled by the Suryavamshi dynasty from 1435 AD to 1540 AD. There was a period of confusion after 1540 to 1560, when the Chalukyan power under Mukundadeva, who ruled from 1560 to 1568. He was the last Hindu king in Orissa and he only ruled for 8 years. In 1568, Sulaiman Karani attacked Orissa, and with this, Muslim invasion happened in 1568 and the Hindu supremacy came to an end. Due to its geographical location, it was able to withstand the Muslim conquest till 16th century. Even during the Muslim rule from Delhi, the distance was so long that its traditions were preserved even till the first half of the 19th century, when the British East India Company defeated the Marathas, who had ruled Orissa till 1751. It's a proven fact in history that the concept of dance, in accordance with Natyashastra, slowly faded away into oblivion beyond the 11th century, paving way to the DESI concept, which brought in the concept of DESI Karanas. Again, by the 16th or the 17th century, the system changed depending upon the individual's region's variations and focus. The evidence to this transformation is the very existence of treatises of those periods, which have reflected on the dance techniques. The codification of Manasollasa, Sangeet Ratnakara, Nrityaratnavali, Nartana Nirnaya from the 12th century onwards shows how the concept of Desi Karanas developed. By the 18th century, the regional texts, Maheshwara Mahopatra's Abhinaya Chandrika, Sangeeta Narayana, which was written by Purushottama Mishra, Sangeeta Kalpalatika, written by Haladhara Mishra, and even Raghunath Ratha's Natya Manorama, all these texts prove the fact that it was a system of existence of different dance forms. Coming to the references, I would like to mention these references. History of Odisha by Manas Kumar Das, Dr. Padma Subramaniam's book on Karanas, The Cult of Jagannatha and the Regional Tradition of Odisha, of course, Natyashastra, Sangeeta Ratnakara, even Natya Manorama, and Abhinaya Chandrika. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Manorama BN, the editor of Noopura Bhramari, who has given this wonderful opportunity and who has guided me in this present study. I would like to thank Odisha State Museum, who have given us permission to enter the museum and take the photographs. I would also like to thank Archaeological Survey of India, Bhubaneswar Circle, Odisha, who gave us permission to visit many of the temples, and they gave permission for photography. Dr. Shobha Shashikumar, who accompanied me to the field survey and gave her inputs. And this was a very big insight, of course, for the present study. And I also would like to thank my daughter, Shishira P. Vittal, who accompanied me for the field survey and helped me in taking the photographs and compiling them. Thanks to one and all. Namaskara.
Excellent presentation by Srimati Shalini Vittal. The researcher has drawn data from history, field trips, study of Shastras, and from her practical exposure to the art. The research is unique, the approach is comprehensive and multi-dimensional. The research, when it comes out as a book, will be a great value addition to the art community. In addition to what has been already done, references can be drawn from literary works in Sanskrit and the Deshi languages of the particular region. The researcher can also try to see if there are sculptures that do not fall into any of the definitions given the Marga and the Deshi works. As a whole, it was very rewarding to watch the presentation of Srimati Shalini Vittal. Congratulations by Arjun Bharadwaj, contributing editor Preksha. Congratulations to the researcher for bringing so many perspectives to the study on the historical and technical aspects of the sculptures of Odisha region. The researcher can get more meticulous about the Lakshana Granthas while discussing the technicalities in the sculpture. The details of how the lakshanas of the charis or karanas are seen in the sculpture may be described to justify the identification. Also, the link between cultural history and technical history may be looked for in more detail, which has been given a random approach in the presentation. Best wishes by Dr. Shobha Shashikumar, dance teacher and visiting faculty in Jain University, Bengaluru.